Hi everybody, and welcome to the second of two videos on the Pentax K2. K2 right there. And the first video looked at all of the features. The second video is going to talk a little bit about how to use the camera and some of the features. So, first thing we're going to look at is lens mounting and dismounting. I have a Pentax SMC M. Pentax M Super Multi-Coated 50mm f1 to 2. I think it's the kit lens. I'm not honestly sure, 100% sure what the kit lens with this camera was. But basically, to mount and unmount the lens, you push this lever down right here, rotate counterclockwise to unmount a mounted lens, line up the two red dots, put the bayonet in, rotate it clockwise until it clicks to mount it, and now the lens is mounted. Let's see, the next thing is loading the film. So I'm going to take a old roll of film here. And loading the film, it's like loading any 35mm SLR. I'm going to lift the film rewind knob up, pull it till the back door pops open. I'm going to take this roll of 35mm film, put it in like that. Going to set this on, make sure that that's set on 1/1000th of a second instead of automatic, because we don't want, with a lens cap on, we don't want it metering at 8 seconds as we advance this film. Now for anything less than 0, the shutter speed, if you set it on automatic, actually triggers at something like 1/60th or 1/125th. But once you hit 0, it will trigger based on the available light, so if a lens cap is on, it can really take a lot of time. So trip the shutter, advance the film. Now we want to close the back door. And the exposure counter is at -2, -1, 0, and we're ready to go. I typically take an extra frame when I load film because I do a lot of my own bulk loading. And so taking that extra frame helps ensure that no exposed frames or partially exposed frames start off the roll, and that way I don't lose any images on the film. So anyway, so that's how we load the film. To take an image, the easiest way is to set it at automatic. Set it at automatic, there we go. Let the camera take care of the metering. I'm going to set it at f2. Now I'm going to set it at f22. There we go. You can see that it's oh, the ISO is set poorly. That's why. It sounded like it should have been taking a different amount of time. Anyway, I'm going to do that again just to show you, because part of that was off the camera. So right now it's set on automatic. I'm going to set it at f2. You can hear that's a pretty fast shutter. It was metering off the light. I'm going to set it at f22, cover up some of the light. Slightly slower shutter, not much slower. Not sure why. Anyway, maybe there's just there is a ton of ambient light in here. There usually is when I film. Oops, sorry about that. These things. So that's how you would take the film, take the images. If you are, let's see if we can get the. Can we get the viewfinder in there? Sometimes we can see through the viewfinder, not with this setup apparently. At any rate, the viewfinder, let me see if I can set this here. The viewfinder has the, I want to make sure, okay. So the viewfinder has the shutter speeds listed on the right side, automatic through 8 seconds, and then it has a needle which adjusts to the proper light reading based on your aperture setting and the light. And then there's a secondary blue needle that lines up with it if you're using manual mode, or automatically, or set to auto if you have it in automatic mode. And then the black needle, the first needle I was talking about, tells you what the shutter speed would be, no matter what your setting is when you look through the viewfinder. And excuse me, sorry about that. Let's see, so this, I've got to find my spot in this outline again. Rewind the film. Okay, so after you've taken all of your images with the camera, you've used up the entire roll of film, you would rewind the film by pushing down on this button right here and rewinding the film. Before we go all the way through with that, though, oh, and this is how you can tell, by the way, if your film is being advanced. You can see that the film take-up spool rotates counterclockwise as the film moves through the camera. We're going to take a look inside the camera. Okay. So this is what the process that happens as you take a picture. Actuate the shutter. Now you're advancing the film. And what happens is, you can see the film guide rails right here that we talked about in the last video help keep the film in alignment. And then the film rails are underneath the sprocket holes right there, and they help keep it flat. And then the pressure plate, you can see how the film's bowing as I move it through the light here. I'm doing that on purpose so you can see the film bowing. With the pressure plate helps keep the film flat against the back of the camera so that it doesn't bow. If the film bows like this, then you're going to get blurry and focused spots on the same negative. I have a few cameras that do that. They're older, cheaper ones. So the film pressure plate helps keep everything flat so that the entire image plane is in focus in the way that it's supposed to be. Now, so you take the pictures, you're taking all of your different shots, and once you've finished your entire roll, you would rewind it, as we were seeing earlier. You can hear the film moving in the camera as you do this. You might not be able to. But when you hear a clicking sound, it's come off of the take-up spool. Also, the tension in this changes. Then, give it another half crank, and it's safe to take the film out. Actually, if you're taking this to be developed, you would crank it the entire way. I'm taking this out to reuse it in the future video, so I don't want to rewind it the entire way, otherwise I won't be able to get the film back out again. So this camera, unlike some of the others, some of its contemporaries, does not have an automatic multiple exposure button. So to do a multiple exposure on this camera, what you would do is take your first picture, come down here, hold down the film rewind button, advance the film, take your second picture. Now you can keep doing this as long as you want to take 3, 4, 5 exposures on the same frame. Then as soon as you're done with all of your exposures, you put the cap back on, take a picture, advance it. Now it takes a part of a frame for the film to sprocket to start turning again. So after you've finished that, then you take one more dead frame just to make sure you don't have an overlapping of the double exposure or multiple exposure you've just spent a whole bunch of time and effort capturing. As we mentioned, the flash sync speed on this is 1/125th of a second, so if anytime you use flash photography, you'll want to set this to 1/125th, set it manually to that speed setting. And let me get this back in focus, that's better. And then you can use a flash in your hot shoe up there and successfully. And I actually used this last week to do a roll in my studio, which is code for my bathroom, with a sheet hanging on the wall, and some self-portraits to test some different lighting setups. And so what I did was I set it at 1/25th, put a flash in here, actually put a flash cable on here, and then a flash on top of it, and ran a cable to a secondary flash. Lighting setups, there are plenty of those videos on YouTube done by professionals who know more about it than I do. So if you're interested about lighting setups, check those out. I don't have one, and probably won't have one, because it's just beyond my skill set. In the last video, I talked briefly about mirror lockup mode with this button right over here. So let's say that here are some settings in which you want to use mirror lockup. If you are taking a landscape portrait or a building photo and you want to have a long exposure, or you're on a tripod and you want to make sure you have minimum shake because you want to get a high quality finished result, set everything up adjust your focus, adjust your aperture, make sure that all of your settings are done correctly, and then you would lock up the mirror with this button, actuate your shutter, and then the mirror would already be locked up, so the shutter would open with minimal shake to the camera, or none if you're on a sturdy enough tripod. Captures the image, closes the shutter, you can advance it, and then if you wanted to do some things like bracketing, you could take multiple exposures with the same focus and then keeping the mirror locked up the whole time, changing the aperture or the shutter speed, however you wanted to bracket it. And then that's a pretty useful function of mirror lockup. Mirror lockup also works if you are taking like a family portrait on the timer. Set all your settings, turn the mirror lockup, activate the self timer on the front over here, and then run in quick, join your family, and take the picture. That works as well. Another thing, if you're taking star trails photos, what you can do is put it into mirror lockup and then put the cover on the back, and that gives you extra prevention of camera shake. And then the mirror lockup, if you want to take 2 or 3 pictures to bracket your star trails, helps make sure that the mirror stays seated in the exact same way. But what mirror lockup mode does is it keeps the camera from shaking when you take a picture. And anytime when camera shake needs to be avoided for a longer exposure or a very high-end exposure, mirror lockup is extremely useful. It's a great function to have on this camera, and it's a real asset anytime a camera has it. Where was I on this? Let's see. And then, okay, so the last thing we want to talk about was that the split prism. And I mentioned this before in the last video, but split prism, it's a small circle. Let's pretend that this is your viewfinder, okay? And so you've got your viewfinder coming along here, down this way, along the bottom of the frame, and then up. And if that's your viewfinder, then you're going to have a circle a little bit smaller than this. And that's the center-weighted metering circle. And then inside that circle, there's an even smaller one, and that's the split prism with a horizontal line through it. The things to bear in mind are that the center circle, the larger of the 2 circles, are where most of the metering data is going to be collected by the camera's meter. So if you have a very, very dark area within that circle, it's going to meter the image as though it's about that darkness for the entire image. Likewise, if you have a very bright area in that circle, it's going to meter the image as though most of the meter is that very bright area. I'm sorry, most of the image is that very bright area. And then that center smallest area, split viewfinder, is for the fine detail focusing. The entire image will come in and out of focus on the focusing screen, but the split center is a focusing aid that brings 2 parts of an image into alignment, so you know when they are focused because they align properly. It's slightly easier to focus that way than using like a K1000 screen, which is just a matte screen, and you have to gauge with your own eyes how well something is or is not focused. So this wraps up my second of these videos. If you would like to see some images from this video, stick around. I will tack on some photos that I'm sorry, some images from this camera. I will put on some photos as soon as this video ends that I took with this camera, or maybe with my other K2, with one of my K2s at any rate. And you can see how some of the metering works. And I have a few that I'll put in that show some very complicated metering scenarios. And the other thing is, if you like this video, if it was helpful, give me a thumbs up if you could. I do always appreciate that. And if you subscribe with this button up here, then you'll know anytime I have a new video coming out, and I have a whole bunch more planned for the next year. Likewise, if you leave any comments down below, I'm pretty good about responding to them pretty quickly. If you have any suggestions for ways I can improve my video, I will do that. I've taken a number of suggestions about how to improve these videos and have tried to implement them, including a different color background than white. And then the other thing is, if you have any things you would like to see covered in a video, if I have the equipment and the knowledge, I'm more than happy to make that video for you and to share some of my knowledge. That's what I'm doing here. So anyway, stick around for some images from this camera, and look forward to I hope this was helpful, and let me know what I can do to improve in the future.